torture chambers, brutal wars, and civilizations that destroyed themselves. The Inquisition burned thousands alive, and empires collapsed under their own madness. But what if I told you history's darkest horrors were caused by human hands? Stay tuned, because what you're about to hear will change the way you see the past forever. Subscribe now, before history repeats itself. The Chain of Catastrophes, a tale of human error and Dark Ages despair. Prologue, the edge of disaster. The city trembled. The air was thick with the stench of death, the sound of chaos echoing through the streets. It had happened again. Another disaster, another mistake. History was full of them. Tiny errors, miscalculations, acts of arrogance that turned bustling cities into graveyards. Some, like the Black Death, were blamed on divine wrath. Others, like the nuclear disaster in Kishtim, were the result of secrets and silence. But all of them shared one terrible truth: they could have been prevented. This is the story of how humanity nearly destroyed itself, again and again. The Plague of Death. The year was 1347. The first whispers came from the docks. Ships arriving with their crews dead, their bodies blackened with boils. Within weeks, the streets of Europe were filled with carts piled high with the dead. God has cursed us, the priests muttered. Others pointed fingers at foreigners, witches, or even the unlucky. No one knew the truth, that the disease was spreading through the very rats that ran beneath their feet, their fleas carrying an invisible killer. The people didn't stand a chance. Entire cities were wiped from the map. Families locked themselves away, but death seeped through the cracks. The bodies rotted in the streets. The air reeked of decay. The Black Death took 200 million souls. But it was just the beginning. The night the sky caught fire. The people of Bhopal, India, had gone to sleep unaware that their own city would betray them before sunrise. The factory loomed in the night, its walls hiding a deadly secret. Inside, a toxic gas, methyl isocyanate, was stored in rusting tanks. Safety systems had failed one by one. And then, a single miscalculation, a pressure valve left unchecked, and here a silent poison slithered through the air, invisible but unstoppable. By morning, thousands were dead in their beds. Children never woke up. Parents died clutching their loved ones. The lucky ones were left blind, gasping. Their lungs burned beyond repair. The worst industrial disaster in history. All because someone ignored the warning signs. The day molasses became a monster. Boston, 1919. A warm winter afternoon. The city bustled as people went about their day, unaware of the silent killer lurking in the shadows. A massive steel tank filled with 2.3 million gallons of molasses loomed over the city streets. It had been built quickly, the rivets barely holding. No one thought much of it, until the pressure inside became too much. And then, boom! A tidal wave of thick, boiling molasses roared through the streets at 35 miles per hour, flattening buildings, crushing people, and swallowing horses whole. It was sticky, it was suffocating, it was inescapable. A mistake in construction, a failure to check the pressure, and suddenly, the city was drowning in syrup and death. The button that almost ended the world. Hawaii 2018. It started as an ordinary morning, until millions of phones lit up with a terrifying message. Ballistic missile inbound. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. People ran screaming through the streets. Parents shoved their children into storm drains, desperate to shield them from an explosion that never came. Because the missile wasn't real. A single worker sitting in a government control room had pressed the wrong button, a mistake that sent an entire state into blind panic for 38 minutes, long enough for people to say their last goodbyes, to accept their fate. One button, one touch, and for nearly an hour, a paradise turned into a nightmare dot. The city that never was. Some disasters unfold in minutes, others take years, waiting like a ticking bomb. In the Soviet Union, the town of Kishtim was thriving, until it became a ghost town overnight. A nuclear storage tank, ignored and poorly maintained, overheated deep underground. Scientists had warned of the risk, but in an era of secrecy, the truth was dangerous. So, nothing was done. Then, boom! A nuclear explosion that rivaled Hiroshima. A toxic cloud spread across thousands of miles. The people of Kishtim weren't warned. They went about their days drinking poisoned water, breathing radioactive dust. By the time the truth came out, the damage was irreversible. The town was abandoned, wiped off maps. The Soviets pretended it had never existed. The ship that should never have sunk. April 14th, 1912. The Titanic sliced through the icy Atlantic, the world's greatest engineering marvel. But arrogance had built her. The captain ignored iceberg warnings, the lifeboats were too few, and the lookouts, tasked with watching for danger, had no binoculars. When the iceberg appeared in the dark, it was already too late. The unsinkable ship groaned, split, and dragged 1,500 souls into the freezing abyss. A tragedy not of fate, but of human pride, taught the lessons never learned from the burning libraries of the Dark Ages to the nuclear threats of modern times. History has whispered the same warning. The greatest disasters are not caused by nature nor by fate, but by human hands. We build, we destroy, we repeat. But what if we could break the cycle? What if we learned from our mistakes? Or are we doomed to make them again? The bloody legacy of the Inquisition, torture and civilizations that destroyed themselves. The flames of fate. The flickering of flames danced on the walls, casting eerie shadows over the stone chambers. The city was quiet, too quiet. Outside, the streets were empty, the air heavy with fear. Inside, the sounds of agony echoed through the halls of a dark ancient castle, where innocent lives were destroyed by the hands of those who claimed to bring salvation. But the true torment was not the flames themselves. It was what came before, the whispers in the dark, the cold steel, the crushing weight of power in the hands of those who claim to be the righteous dot. This is the story of the Inquisition, when fear ruled the land and torture became a tool of faith, and how, across history, civilizations ravaged themselves through endless war and bloodshed. The Inquisition begins, the search for heresy. The year was 1231. The Catholic Church, once a beacon of hope and salvation, had turned its gaze inward. But it wasn't the soul that they sought to save. It was the purity of belief. In the heart of Europe, whispers of heresy began to spread. Ordinary people, farmers, merchants, even scholars were accused of witchcraft, of worshipping false gods, of defying the Church. And when these whispers reached the ears of the inquisitors, there would be no mercy. One by one, people were dragged from their homes, bound in chains, and taken to the dreaded chambers of torture. They were given one simple choice: confess or face unimaginable pain. The horrors of the torture chambers. In the depths of the dungeons, where the light of day never touched, the methods of torture were designed to break the mind, body, and spirit. The Iron Maiden, a terrifying contraption resembling a coffin, was used to impale its victims with sharp spikes. Those unlucky enough to be locked inside were left to slowly bleed to death, their cries silenced by the cold iron. But the breaking wheel was perhaps the most brutal. Victims were tied to a large wooden wheel, their limbs shattered by blunt force. Then, as they lay in agony, the wheel was hoisted into the air for display, a gruesome reminder of what awaited anyone who dared defy the church dot. And it wasn't just physical pain that was inflicted.
The rack, a device designed to stretch its victims' limbs until they dislocated or tore apart, was used to force confessions from even the most innocent. For years, these torturous methods were seen as necessary, a grim but justified means of purging the world of evil. The Inquisition's grip tightened as it spread across Europe like wildfire, claiming the lives of thousands in the name of righteousness. The self-destruction of empires, war's never-ending cycle. While the Inquisition waged its war on the soul, other civilizations were engaged in a far more brutal battle, the war against themselves. Take the Roman Empire, once a mighty force that stretched across continents, but internal strife, endless wars with its own people, and a crippling obsession with expansion tore it apart. The empire could no longer control the vast lands it had conquered, and in the end, it collapsed from within. The Western Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, consumed by its own bloodlust and internal decay. Then there was the Mayan civilization. Towering pyramids and intricate cities were the pride of the Mayan people, but their endless warfare between city-states led to an unspeakable destruction. The Mayans sacrificed thousands in bloody rituals, their empire drained by endless conflict and internal betrayal. It collapsed, not from an outside force,
but from its own desire to conquer and control. Even in the Middle Ages, the legacy of war and destruction continued. The 100 Years' War between England and France bled both nations dry, each battle leaving scars that could never heal. Towns were burned, lives lost, and the land itself poisoned by the violence. Empires rose and fell, but their endless thirst for power led them to destroy the very foundations of their civilizations. The Inquisition's lasting legacy. The years passed, and the flames of the Inquisition eventually died down, but the legacy of torture, fear, and blind obedience remained. The Church's grip on knowledge, its control over the masses, left scars that would linger for centuries. The Spanish Inquisition continued its reign of terror well into the 19th century, with thousands more victims suffering for the crime of thinking differently. And yet the bloodshed continued. Just as the empires of old had destroyed themselves through war, the Inquisition, with its thirst for control, nearly brought down all of Europe with its brutality. The aftermath. Lessons we've yet to learn. As the world moved forward, we would like to believe that we learned from our bloody past. But even today, the scars of torture and war linger in our minds. Governments rise, fall, and often repeat the mistakes of their predecessors. The cycle of violence, power, and fear is an ever-present danger. The Inquisition serves as a chilling reminder of what happens when fear and power come together. The horrors of the past are not just history, they are a warning. Could we too destroy ourselves in the pursuit of power? Could we, like the Romans, the Mayans, and the Inquisitors, fall victim to our own destructive ways? The answer lies in how we choose to learn from the past, or whether we choose to repeat it. A desolate battlefield, blood-soaked earth under a dim sky. The sound of a ticking clock fills the silence. A desolate battlefield, blood-soaked earth under a dim sky. The sound of a ticking clock fills the silence. The Inquisition, endless wars, civilizations that destroyed themselves. These are the stories we can't afford to forget. But what will we do next? Will we rise from the ashes or be consumed by them? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more tales of history's darkest moments.